we are going to start a session, question answer session with Niral and Mr. Devesh. So what we can do, like, still some more people they are going to join, but we can start the session. In the chat box, what you can do, you can put maybe your city name one by one. We will be not taking the question. One question for one person in one go. Once it gets completed, if you have any other question, then we will come back to you once again. That's our strategy, because most of the questions we believe that they are going to be similar only. So let's give chance to each one of you. So in the chat box, please start. You can see, for example, who's there. Soumya, you are from Raipur, so you can write maybe your city and country name. We are going to have people from West Coast to Singapore. In the chat box, please write, and we will call each one of you. You can unmute and fine. Okay. Ananya has put, and rest on everyone can put. So Ananya, you can start with the question from Niral. And before that, Niral, now it's good time that you introduce yourself, because now people have joined.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name is Niral Patel. I am current founder of my admissions consulting firm, Elite Edge Admissions. We work with students to help place them in the top tier programs in the U.S. and in top tier high ranking internship positions. I'm currently with my associate Devesh, and essentially this business is it's a joint venture between myself, current first year student at Stanford University, and other students at Harvard and Yale. And totally just lost my train of thought. But yeah, you can go ahead, Devesh.
Devesh.
All right, yeah. So I guess I'll fill in the blanks on that introduction. So essentially, Elite Edge Admissions Consulting, we are a network, a network of professionals and students that have been admitted into these top universities, and we work with ex-admissions officers that used to work in the admissions office of like these top universities, and we used these applications, and from that knowledge, we come up with creative strategies to get people into these top universities. And it's really broad, and I think that's why it's very difficult to explain, because we go into examples on students that we've worked with recently, internships that we've placed them in, and I feel like that'll be more beneficial than just giving a broad description of what we do. So and I think I can follow up with those when I get the question.
Yep.
Okay. Rest of the people, can you please unmute when your turn comes? You can, sorry, you can mute it. Okay, fine. Okay, so let's start with the question answer session. The first one from Ananya. Okay, that's okay. If you do not have any question, we can skip. We can go to the next. Soumya. Soumya, you can ask your question.
And just to clarify, we specialize in U.S. and Canadian universities. We don't know too much aside from U.S. and Canadian universities. Like, some people try to ask us about UK universities. We're not familiar with admissions for that. But we have the most experience with United States universities and Canadian universities. So just if anyone's interested in attending, yeah, okay.
Fine, fine. So Ananya, you are saying I don't have a question yet. Okay, that's okay. So next one, Soumya, if you want, we can start with you.
Aditya, what
No,
we
you
can
can
do
ask
is
it.
that whomsoever
can
have a question, they can raise their hand. Then we can.
I mean, obviously, I'm taking in one by one. Soumya, you do not need to type it, but still I can read for you. Soumya is asking, I have applied to MIT and I'm in waiting list. What more I can do to enhance my profile?
Okay, sure. So obviously a lot of students, it very much varies based on your profile. The whole reason they put you on the waiting list is essentially, they only have a set number of students that they choose to accept to the university. Obviously, little spots, a lot of applicants, and you weren't directly in terms like not fit for them. They simply many very strong candidates that they decided to go with, and they're waiting basically on those candidates to, make the decision whether they're going to accept or reject. And, for those who end up rejecting, the yield rate for these universities varies based on the year. I can go more into, or Divesh, if you want to, into how, the coronavirus situation has changed that, especially with international applicants. But essentially, they kind of have you on this backup list for if, there's a number of students that end up rejecting, they want to fill those spots with
So
other
I think she's looking for like an actionable solution. In which case, I don't think there's much you can do it in this stage in the process. Some universities do allow you to write a letter of continued interest, but I'm not sure if MIT, Niral, I guess you can expand on that, but MIT specifically, I think a lot of people don't allow a letter of continued interest. It depends on the school, but if they do allow it, I would I would write a letter of continued interest of why specifically, MIT is your top choice and how you want, if you got accepted, you would definitely attend, and what specifically interests you about the school. But then again, that is if the program allows you to write a letter of continued interest. Some schools specifically don't allow it. Some schools specifically allow it. So what I would do is I would call the admissions office and say, hey, I would like to write a letter of continued interest. How does MIT perceive those letters? If they perceive them well, then I would write a beautiful, well-written, strategic letter of continued interest. If not, then there's nothing you can do. And, we typically don't help students in that stage of the process. We typically help students in building their profile and their essays, before they press the submit button on their application. Am I right, Niral?
Yep. No, you've made a very good point.
Does that answer your question? I just want to make sure we covered it.
Soumya, so you got your answer? Okay, fine. So next one is Mr. Prashant Patel. Mr. Prashant, you can direct Niral.
I can speak also, Aditya, if you can hear me.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Yeah. Okay, thanks. So this is Prashant here. I'm speaking on behalf of our son, Kaushal. So Niral, congratulations, and as well, thanks for taking this session, as well to Divesh. Thanks to you. So question from our side is, our son is in the 10th grade as of now. So when you say you're going to help us in terms of the profile building and as well to the taking it to the next level, is the 10th grade is good to start now, or when we should get in touch with you? How does it work, and how long it will hand holding will happen till the admission? So how does it work?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we've worked with students, from 8th grade through the beginning of their senior year when the college application season has begun. And so all these different stages, obviously the earlier is the better. To answer directly your question, yes, 10th grade, we worked with a number of students in that range. And essentially the whole goal starting, before you're directly applying to colleges is to work on, the student's background. Obviously there's academics in terms of their SAT, ACT, and their GPA. But when we talk about profile building, all of these colleges, to be frank, have a, certain number of spots that they can fill. And the process in terms of choosing it really has a lot to do with how, important or how stellar the student's background is. And the reason that they look at that is because, it's kind of like a branding thing. They want students who are going to be well-off alumni, successful alumni. For example, you have like Elon Musk, Tiger Woods, alumni of Stanford University. They increase the brand for the school. And so when we work with students, I guess, you can chime in if you want, Divesh.
Yeah, so let me sort of reiterate what I'm trying to say. Let me start with the problem, and then I'll explain exactly, I'll get to your question as soon as we cover the problem. So what the problem is that exists specifically in the United States is that Indian American applicants have a disadvantage when applying to these top universities, in the sense that, we are often compared to each other, and we all tend to have really high stats. So studies show, and I can link some of these studies later after this call, but studies show that Asian American and South Asian applicants, so Indian and Chinese in particular, they have to get like 150 to 200 points higher on the SAT just to be an equivalent candidate at some of these top schools. And the issue really comes from these schools want to have a diverse class of people from different backgrounds. And all Indian and Chinese American students all apply for the same studies. We all apply for, I mean, just think about Indian people. We're going to apply for engineering, business, medicine, right? Very rarely do we stray out of those three categories. Now, that's difficult for us. That makes it difficult for us to stand out, because you're just going to be the, you know, if you apply to Stanford University, for example, you're going to be among a large stack of other Indian students that are wanting to study the same thing. But then how do you stick out? You know, what makes you unique out of that stack of applicants? And what we specialize in, to be completely honest, is that uniqueness factor. So now to build that uniqueness factor, we start, the earlier we can start, the better. So we've worked very successfully. I know I have, particularly on Ananya. Sorry, not Ananya. Yeah, Monica. So there was a girl named Monica that I particularly worked with from 9th grade all the way up until her application season this year. And in order to build that uniqueness factor, obviously the earlier you can start, the better. And I guess this is when I progress into examples. So in Monica's specific example, she was pre-med and she wanted to apply to some of these top universities. Okay. So it's the same problem. It's just another Indian student that wants to study medicine at a US, you know, university, pre-medicine, like undergraduate studies focused on like medicine to then apply to medical school. So in Monica's case, what we did was, actually, I believe I work, Niral, I worked with you on this to create that 501 not-for-profit organization.
Mm-hmm.
And so we built a registered government not-for-profit organization. So it's registered with the US government. It's a not-for-profit organization. The not-for-profit is focused on tutoring underprivileged children. Okay, and you're probably really confused. Why would we create a not-for-profit on tutoring underprivileged children? So this girl, Indian girl, had really good GPA, really good SAT scores. But in order to stick out from that stack of students, that's when we gather intelligence from some of these admissions officers at these top schools and figure out what they're looking for. So each school has a unique culture. Okay. So for example, the Ivy League schools and Stanford have a very neoliberal culture. So by liberal means they want to have a very diverse class. Okay. And they want to have a very diverse class because if you are around everyone that's like the same interests and same goals as you, it doesn't inspire innovation, right? You think about US innovation, like, you know, all the things that have been innovated in the United States, like these tech startups, Facebook, Google. The US philosophy behind that innovation is you want to be surrounded by people with all different interests and all different goals to then inspire you. So that's why when they select people for their class, they want someone that's really unique and different. Because if they didn't do that, then primarily all these universities would be, you know, just Chinese and Indian students that want to study engineering or business, right? And they would purely just look at stats. So basically all these students that apply to these top universities have good stats. They have a good SAT score. They have a good GPA. So we do something really unique, fitting what the culture of the school is looking for. So in this particular case, a not-for-profit organization that's registered with the U.S. government. It's a 501c taxable, you know, U.S. entity. And the fact that a student created that and it gained recognition throughout her community, and we put it on her application, really boosted her odds of getting into some of these top programs. And I believe she got into most of her top programs aside for a few, as a result of that not-for-profit that we created from start to finish. We guided her on how to, you know, gain a following, how to get volunteers from her local high school. Mm-hmm. So I know in the United States in particular, you need to get sponsorship from a high school teacher just to create a group at your school. Okay.
Yeah.
so that whole process of, registering with the government, getting how to strategize it so your high school supports you, and then how to get following. It's one thing to say you created something, but it's one thing to say you created something and you have 50 people, volunteering with you and, doing it with you on a regular basis. So for this particular girl, for this not-for-profit organization, we started this the summer going into grade 10. And in order to become like a big organization, so she had like 40 to 50 followers, obviously it doesn't start right away. So like there's one step at a time to get to those 50 followers, to get recognition in your local community. She got published in a local newspaper, and all of that, all encompassing, was included in her application essays, as well as it helped her get letter of recommendations, as well as we included that she got published in the local news. So now if you think of all the things combined for this particular candidate, when she's in a stack of applicants, all of a sudden she's really unique, right? Yeah. Out of all those people, because she's done something that like majority of those people have never done before. And that's what a lot of people don't realize, is that you need to do something very unique, and we call it getting your hook. Okay. And you can get your hook in various ways. Okay. Without your hook, there's nothing. You have no chance of getting into these top universities, because if you're just a well-rounded student and you say, hey, I have good grades, I have a good SAT score, I did this competition, I did that competition. Well, that doesn't make you stand out. They want someone that's going to really stand out. And in order to do that, you have to come up with some really creative solutions. So a not-for-profit organization is one thing. One thing that I've helped a student do, and I just mentioned earlier, is connect a student with the research and development department at a large Fortune 500 company in the United States. So she actually went to Dallas and did an R&D internship at AT&T's headquarters. And then from that R&D internship, it was actually an unpaid internship. Her family flew her to Dallas, and she stayed there for about 10 weeks. She worked under someone that we know. At the end of the 10 weeks, she got to say that she did R&D at AT&T, which is a Fortune 500 company in the United States. She got a letter of recommendation from the person she was working under, and that all was included on her application. And that's another thing that made her stand out from the rest of the applications in that big pile. Does that sort of make sense? Yeah. So the earlier we can get started, the earlier we can introduce that student and accomplish these things. So in Niral's case, what Niral, and Niral, I'll speak on your behalf for a little bit. In Niral's case, he has that vast network amongst that startup community in the Valley. So often students that are interested in engineering, I believe, what was that car startup we connected that one student with to do an internship, Niral? Fix.
Might have been Rivian or something. Yeah.
Rivian. Yeah, Rivian. So without having this network of people, it's really hard, because everyone has good grades. Everyone has a good SAT score when you apply to these top universities. But who has a letter of recommendation from a startup founder that's successful that got $50 million in funding? Who gets to say they worked for a startup that, it got $50 million in funding? That itself is a big accomplishment for a high school student. And when you say that you did these things and you got a letter of recommendation, it's extremely, extremely valuable for the application. So one thing that's different about Indian universities, it's all about raw stats. What did you get on your exam, and how did you do? I mean, that's pretty much it, right? What's the Indian exam to get into universities? The GE. Well, I'm asking you guys. I'm totally unfamiliar with the high school process in India.
What's that come again, Devesh? What's the question you said?
The exam that you take to get into like IIT and stuff.
You mean the IIT joint entrance exams? Yeah, it's called JW.
Right. So in India, it's all about stats. Over here, it's all about, okay, what's something special that you've done? Did you create a not-for-profit? Did you do an internship at a startup? And did that founder of the startup write you a letter of recommendation? Okay. Did you get
Mhm.
published did you do research with a professor, and did the professor publish your work? Right? Did you create a startup? Did you create an app while you're in high school? How many times did that app get downloaded? Okay.
Yeah.
All these crazy things that you would never expect a high school student to have done, because how can a high school student accomplish these things?
Mhm.
Well, that's when we come in. We utilize our network. If we want to create an app, we'll create an app for you. Not me in particular. I guess that's where, you know, the students at Stanford and such do that. But if you want to do an internship with a Fortune 500 company, you know, that's where I can help you.
Okay.
With people that I personally know within our network. And if not, then we'll find a way to sort of put you in that strategic position so you can do those things. And that's what gives you that differentiating factor when you're applying to these universities. Does that make sense and answer your question?
Yeah,
Niral, you can ask.
absolutely.
So just a moment. Neeraj, so
Yeah.
what was different in your application?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so
So
that may be a question for many of people who are attending this. I mean, this is definitely a question. So what did you do?
yeah, for sure. So, I was always interested in computer science, technology, engineering, since I was little. In middle school, I was involved in a lot of organizations relating to it. But obviously, there are so many Indian students in the U.S. who apply for that same major, especially at Stanford, where it's really reclaimed and known. So I had an interest in this robotics organization throughout high school. I was involved in it through ninth grade. And essentially, to briefly summarize, what we ended up doing was I created this Instagram page for this robotics club, really sponsoring the events we were doing. It was kind of like a fundraising effort to get us funding for attending like international conferences. And over a period of 6 months, this Instagram page ended up gathering over like 7,000 followers within the 6-month period. Essentially, we got a lot of local popularity because of it. Our robotics organization was recognized in the local newspaper, and I talked about that and my passion for that. And what was unique about it was, obviously a lot of these strategies must be unique to the student, and every year they can't just be reused. But my application in particular for the year was, during the rise of Instagram's kind of advertising and marketing, and no other high school student really utilized that and talked about doing that for increasing the popularity of their organization. So a lot of my my essays and what I talked about, and Divesh, you were also involved, while I was doing that, obviously. You can chime in for anything else, but that's in brief really what I focused on.
Yeah, so let me just emphasize this. When we're saying creating an Instagram page, a lot of you are like, what is he talking about? Like, why do you create an Instagram page? That doesn't sound like it's going to get you in a top university. But that's what people don't understand, is that creating a blog, creating an Instagram page in the United States, if that's something that you can like use to display your passion, and in Niral's case, you got 7,000 followers in 6 months. That's a unique twist that we added to the application to say, hey, I'm really passionate about technology and robotics. Here's my Instagram page. These admissions officers are actually going to look at the Instagram page when they look at your application, because on your application, he talked about his Instagram page. So when these students say, hey, I started a blog, and this blog on YouTube has 10,000 followers, they're going to go to youtube.com and they're going to find your blog. Okay. And they're going to look at that and determine, wow, this person created a blog on YouTube, or he created an Instagram page. This many people are following it. This probably means that he is creative, and he's going to create a company with the same mindset when he joins our school. So it's a different mindset that these admissions officers have at some of these top US universities. They look at these things, and they want to see creativity. Okay. They want to see creativity because that creative mindset is what's created, Facebook, Snapchat, Google. That type of mindset is what US innovation is all about. And that's what they want at their schools. And again, that's going to be very different, and it's going to contrast what you see locally in India or elsewhere. I would say that this honestly is very unique to top US universities. Only US universities think about these things and then use them for their admissions criteria. Does that make sense? And it's not that simple. Everyone's like, oh, I can create an Instagram page tomorrow. Well, guess what?
Very true.
Good luck getting 7,000 followers in 6 months, right? There's a whole strategy. There's a whole process, search engine optimization, you know, email marketing, marketing online, you know, getting published, paying for advertising. Like there's all these little shortcuts and things that you have to do to make sure that like what you did is actually substantial, is real, right? Getting published in a local newspaper is a big deal here.
So basically, it's more like, you know, creating your own startup.
Creating your own startup.
In my case, yes.
Yes.
In his case, yes, but it could be creating anything. Create a volunteering organization. You can create a startup. You can create, like, the sky is the limit.
You know, yeah.
The more unique your creation on your application, the higher your chances of admission. And that's what we specialize in.
The whole idea, to add on to that,
it doesn't have to be that you created something. It could be you just did something really creative. Hey,
yeah.
I did research and development at AT&T, a Fortune 500 company in the United States. This is what I did, X, Y, and Z. And then that's going to be on the application. So the admissions officer is going to say, wow, a high school student did this at a Fortune 500 company, you know? And by the way, he's not saying that. It's being backed up by the letter of recommendation. The letter of recommendation by like a high up, you know, PhD professional is backing up with the students on the application, and that completes the story, and that's how these people get admitted.
Yeah, very well spoken. You know, just to add on to that, you know, at the end of the day, if you look at it, you know, what's really important is we try to understand this from the university's perspective. So we work with, you know, undergraduate students and actual ex-admissions officers who have been involved in the application process. You know, I mentioned undergraduate students, I'm not sure if people know, but they actually involve students from the university in the acceptance or in the admissions process in terms of reading these applications. So a lot of students get, at some universities, a lot of these students get, you know, they want a youthful perspective, you know, will this student fit into the campus? And they use these students for this. And so, you know, at the end of the day, what these universities are really looking for is, you know, when this student comes to campus and when the student graduates, what kind of value are they going to leave into the world? And, you know, you can look at GPA and ACT for those different metrics, but, you know, nowadays, you know, if you really look at it, like a robot can really answer those questions. A robot can do those. But what separates a human from really being able to get, like, say, academics, test scores, is that type of value and what kind of creativity they provide. And some universities really emphasize this. Obviously, Stanford, being in the heart of this type of innovative culture, does that. But many other universities use that same metric.
Fine. That makes sense. So next question from someone. You can raise your hand, or you can simply type in the chat. If you want to ask any other question, yeah, Miss Shobha, yeah, you can unmute and, you know, please ask.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Aditya, Niral, and Devesh for bringing this to us. I'm actually talking on behalf of my daughter, who is a rising senior right now. From what I've gathered so far with the conversations we've had so far, it's basically a long haul. It's a long-term plan, right? I mean, if you have a student who is in 9th grade or, you know, rising sophomore or something, yes, all of that plan works. Because my daughter is a rising senior, what are the chances that these things can actually be done? Of course, she's done a few of volunteering, work, but actually for a profile to stand out like how you're actually explaining now, what are the chances?
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Actually, Devesh has, closely worked with the rising senior category, so I'm going to let him, take the scene for that.
Right. So I'll chime in on that. So, what I was saying before, I don't want it to be misperceived. So the earlier, the better. As in, like, if you come to us when you're in 9th grade, there's more opportunities and there's more options in what we can do and what we can develop. Now, if you come with us as a rising senior, well, that's when we're going to get really creative with what we currently have. And that's when we really focus on the essay and the application strategy. So I will give you an example. Last year there was a student Indian student that wanted to study computer science at a U.S. university. He was actually U.S. based, but everyone thinks that, you know, I want to study computer science, so I'm going to write that on my application, and like that's how I'm going to apply to these schools. So, you know, if you think of a college admissions essay, I'll just give you like a broad statement. What really makes you, what's something that happened in your life that really made you stand out, or like what are your life goals? You know, things like that are included in your college essay. So everyone thinks, hey, I want to study computer science, so I should write my essay about computer science, right? My interest and passion for computer science or things related to it is the common perception. Well, guess what? So that student was a rising senior, wanted to study computer science. He did some volunteering, as you said, your daughter did. But in his particular case, what we did, we started out with a survey, and he filled out the survey with all his activities that he's ever done in school, all his awards, all extracurriculars, all classes he's taken. He sent us his high school transcript. So we looked at his high school transcript from grade 9 to 11, okay? What his grades were, what classes he took, and everything. What we noticed on his particular transcript is that for the last 3 years, for all of his years of high school, he took this class called journalism. So right away, I picked up and we called this guy, and I was like, hey, why did you study journalism in high school? You're interested in computer science. Well, he said it was an easy elective class. I just took it because it was fun. I liked the teacher. My friends took it with me, and it's an easy class that boosted my GPA. Okay. So you're probably asking me, why is it relevant? I'm talking about the, journalism and him taking journalism classes. So this is what we did. Instead of applying to universities as if as if he's a computer science student interested in computer science, we developed something called a contrarian approach. Okay. The contrarian approach is there's certain U.S. universities, some Ivy League schools, Stanford included, where you can apply to a school. You apply for admissions to the school, and you don't select your major or interest of study until your second year. Okay. So in that particular student's case, we built a beautiful application. We wrote a beautiful essay on his passion for journalism. Even though he wasn't interested in journalism, he doesn't care about journalism, but we chose to write his entire application on his passion for journalism and apply to those specific schools that allow you to change your major after you're admitted as a journalism major. So in his application, we got a letter of recommendation from his journalism teacher at his high school, and we connected him to journalism media organizations with the United States to get him a professional recommendation. And then we crafted his application as if, he's been wanting to pursue journalism for his entire life. Okay. And then here's where we intertwined it with computer science. So in his application, we wrote that, he's really interested in journalism, but also there's the issue going on in the world of whistleblowers. I don't know if you guys are familiar with whistleblowers, but in a lot of countries in the world, specific to China, if you release, if you put a journalism publication out there that talks bad about the government, you can be jailed for it, right? And that's like a local international issue. Okay. So we wrote about his passion for journalism and a passion for that international issue. And we got him professional recommendations that highlight those international issues. And we got a recommendation from his high school teacher, who he took journalism with all 4 years of high school, and he got excellent grades in. Okay. All of that combined in his application, him into top universities. And once he got into the top university, once you get into the top universities, you walk onto campus, and the next day you can change your major and say, hey, I want to study computer science. So there's a few select schools where you can do that. And for that particular student, that's what we did. So for your daughter, we would start looking for those things like, okay, what can we do now? What shortcuts can we use? What strategies can we use? Who can we connect her with that even if she didn't create a not-for-profit, can we write that she did create it? Because we got a backup by someone in our network that wrote her a recommendation saying that she did do it. So even if you didn't do it, we fake it until you make it. We do whatever we do to get, you know, the perfect application and the perfect essay to get the student in to the school. And, you know, some people disagree with this, you know, the concept of, you know, faking it until you make it, but it's effective and we've done it over and over again and it works. Does that answer your question? If you have any follow-up questions, please proceed to ask them.
Yes, definitely that helps. I've heard about the same thing too. You know, if you apply as undecided, you still have a chance to get into the school and then choose your subject for the sophomore year.
Right. So we don't even apply as undecided.
Yeah.
We applied for journalism. In his case, he wanted to study computer science, but his entire application was about journalism. And the reason we do that, one, it makes you unique. All Indian kids are applying for engineering, computer science. No Indian kids are applying for journalism. You know, it's common sense, supply and demand. They don't want to admit every Indian kid into engineering program, but you know, they're getting less applicants for journalism. So wow, all of a sudden this student is unique and he stands out from the rest of the applicants. So now he has a higher chance of getting admitted.
Yeah,
If you
and
do
to add on to that, oh, go ahead. You can
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, you know, this student, you know, first of all, as soon as you send in your application for like, say, a computer science related, you know, any type of like really popular field, you are compared to every other student who sent in an application for the same exact thing. So if he were to apply for computer science, he would have been compared to every other Asian American applicant who wanted to study computer science. Now his stats, first of all, were not even like top tier. Like he didn't have a 36 on his ACT. He didn't have, you know, a perfect 4.0 GPA. He had something, you know, around the average, you know, 3.8, 33, 32 range, which when you're applying for a computer science major, you know, there are a lot of stats involved in that application process. But now the moment that he sent in his application for this journalism major, he's immediately compared to a completely different pool. All Asian American students who are applying for that similar journalism major. Now, for someone who has, you know, a high GPA, high ACT, who's interested in technology, has this background, and he's applying and has a passion for journalism, he stood out among all of those other applicants. And this student in particular was able to attain, like, he's going to Columbia University, you know, one of the top 5.
So just think supply and demand. Computer science
Exactly.
in the United States is the most popular major in the entire country. Everyone knows that technology is the next thing, right? It's common sense. Everyone, you know, there's a lot of smart people out there. Everyone wants to send their kid to study computer science or business or medicine. These are all good fields and there's good money in them. But because of that, it makes you less unique when you apply to that program. When you apply to journalism, there's maybe he was the only Indian student that applied for journalism. Okay. But in that particular case, once he got admitted into journalism, he changed his major to computer science the next day. Okay. Only certain schools will allow that. And these admissions officers are really good at reading, you know, understanding, is this person being fake? Is he just writing a fake story? Is it a real story? And that's what we specialize in, is how can we make this like his life goal was to study journalism, even though we're making this up, right? Ultimately, he doesn't care about journalism, but because he had that letter of recommendation and experience to support it, which we got and collected for him last minute, and we helped him structure his application in a very, very well, you know, very good way that combined world issues, backed up with letters of recommendation, backed up with work experience and things that he's done, and backed up by a recommendation from his high school teacher. It was like a perfect application, and that made him a unique applicant. So basically what I'm saying is he got into Columbia University and he's now studying computer science. But if he applied as a computer science major, or even if he applied as undecided, because undecided doesn't help you get in at these top universities like Columbia, right? Undecided might help you get into Ohio State. But if you want to go to like Stanford, you got to know what your goals are in life, and you have to be like very passionate about it, and you have to back it up, and it has to show on your application. Does that make sense?
Yes, it definitely does.
Devesh,
Yeah.
just to add to this question, I mean, how easy it is to change your branch from
Right.
journalism to computer science, and
Right.
if someone is stuck over there, it becomes a problem. It's a matter of career.
So that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. So certain programs, it's very easy. You can change anytime you want. Certain
Yeah,
universities,
I can change my major today if I really want to, because Stanford's very, like, I can change it tomorrow. I can change it again and again and again until I officially declare, which is the end of my second year. Even after that, I'm not committed to it at all. And that's the kind of like the culture at Stanford, and many other universities follow that same behavior. But you can go into the others.
the thing, culture. We keep saying culture, culture, culture. Culture is so important for the applications at top U.S. universities. You have to fall within that U.S. innovative culture, where they think that if you're going to come to this school, wow, you're going to create something, you're going to do something amazing. That's the end all be all. They don't want just another student that's going to keep their head down and, score good on the test, because those people, they don't create things. They just do good on the test, right? So that's the difference. How easy it is to change, it's going to be dependent on the program and the school. There's certain schools that allow you to do that. There's certain schools where you can't do that. You have to apply for a specific seat in a specific program. And that's when we use another strategy. So we have a whole different application for those schools, and a whole different application for the other schools where you can change your major. So now I suppose that answers the question.
Yes, you did. So this is a good strategy. But I believe many of the students must be following this.
So actually, many other students may try doing this, but what differentiates us is that, it's one thing to say, hey, I created a not-for-profit organization, because everyone can create it.
Yes.
But not everyone can create it, get published in your local newspaper, can get, good sponsorship from like a high up connected person, and then get letters of recommendation associated with it. That's what makes you different. Right now, tomorrow, I can say I created a not-for-profit and write it down on a piece of paper. And that's what a lot of students do. But a lot of people don't get published in their paper. A lot of people don't, don't get recommendations from, high up, well-established people that boost their credibility for getting into the top programs. That's the differentiating factor, right? I can say I created a mobile app, or I can say I created a mobile app and it's got 1,000 downloads, and here's the link to my app. Why don't you try it out? Kind of thing.
That, to summarize, it's really about like the value that's created from this type of venture, whatever it is, whatever that the student stands out in, because that's an indicator of value that they'll create in the future.
Got it. So next question we can take, apart from Mr. Patina's, Madam Shobha's, then anyone would
I
like to
have
ask?
another question. Is that okay, Aditya?
Okay, fine, ma'am. Go ahead.
All right. In terms of these schools itself, I know we're all talking about applications. Is there some kind of homework we need to do about sponsorship and tuition fees? I mean, scholarships rather.
Right. Where are you located? Because it's gonna be different per. Are you located in the U.S.?
Yes.
You're
Atlanta.
located in the U.S.?
Yeah, she said Atlanta.
Oh, Atlanta. Okay. So, different universities give a different amount of scholarships, and they target different demographics of students for those scholarships. So it's going to be unique to that student, her background. It's going to be unique to your income level, because as you know, when you apply to U.S. universities, you can fill out a form called for financial aid. And then there's also, local scholarships in like your local area, as well as, national scholarships. So that's a very broad topic, and it's going to be very unique to your daughter. And that's something that we do help with, and we help with scholarship essays as well. But that's further along in the process, obviously.
And to give you, I guess, something actionable in terms of actual, types of research, I guess the best source of this type of aid, if it's not based on like a need-based basis, where it's like not based on your income level, there are merit scholarships, and a lot, really the chances of getting those can be slim based on how available they are. So if it's like a national scholarship, then there's, insane competition for those types. But really a good place to focus, which many people don't really tend to do, is just within the locality, whether it's your school, your district, or a community foundation in the area. Just really making sure that you know about those and are able to apply as soon as those applications are out. The sooner
Right,
is obviously
and
the
to
better.
sort of also, it's also having a sense of like how giving a school is. So like, for example, I know from personal experience, University of Pennsylvania is very strict with giving out any money to students. If you get admitted to that school, which is already hard to begin with, you're not going to get a scholarship. You're going to have to pay the full tuition price, most likely, because culturally, that's how the school is. It has a reputation for that. That's just collective knowledge that we know about. But now if we go, think about another university, like Brown University, they're very giving to their students, and all their students, pay much less for tuition. A lot less students pay full price. So it's going to depend on the school. Each school has, different policies and different cultures towards giving money to students to attend their university. And your student's profile is going to also determine, how much they want to give you and which school would want to, give you money.
Thank you.
So like University of Pennsylvania might charge $60,000 per year for tuition. If you get admitted, you're probably going to have to take out a loan and pay that full price. But if you get admitted to Brown University, depending on your income level, you may only have to pay like $10,000 or $20,000 per year in tuition. That's because University of Pennsylvania is a school that's known, to charge full price. Brown University is known for being giving and giving students a lot of aid. Now, with that said, lower level universities, if you're an Ivy League, potential Ivy League student candidate, then there's a good chance you can get a full ride at, a university that's lower than that. So like we've helped students get a full rides at like Vanderbilt University. We helped a student get a $50,000 scholarship at University of Maryland. Yeah, yep. University of Maryland. So, don't be discouraged by the high tuition prices, because if you're an Ivy League potential student, you'll get into a school that, depending on your income level will be affordable. And if you don't, there's still going to be schools, maybe one or two levels below that will give you like a scholarship or a really good financial package that's affordable. So nonetheless, like, it's going to vary a lot, and it's going to be variable. And there's no one size fits all package for that question.
Okay. Thank you so much, Devesh. Next question.
And Niral, I apologize if I'm taking up all your time.
No, very well spoken. You can obviously well spoken man. So
Mr. Siva, Mr. Prashant, Mr. Rohit, if you have any other question, or because I have some questions in my mind. Many of the parents, they ask me. If you do not have, then I will ask you.
Aditya, this is Rohit. If it's okay, can I
Yes,
go ahead?
Yeah, sure. Why not, sir?
Okay. Hi, Niral and Devesh. I have a very basic question about standardized test. Somebody said that it's better if you take both SAT and ACT. Now, I just want to get your feedback whether it's necessary to take both, or is it okay just do either SAT or ACT?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in terms of those tests, I actually ended up taking both, but it was not out of choice. To be frank, really it's just one of them that matters, and they're kind of evaluated on the same basis. So if you get SATs out of 1,600 now, if you get like a 1,500 on the SAT, that's really looked at as the same as having like a 34 or 35 on the ACT. It really doesn't matter. The reason that I ended up taking both was like my state ended up changing the high school statewide standardized test that all students have to take end of their junior year. But prior to that, I was really having a lot of my focus on the ACT. And, you know, I had a perfect score on my ACT, 36. But my SAT was, you know, I believe, you know, 35 equivalent. But regardless, I submitted my ACT and it was the normal. Exactly. Like, that's really what had all the weight.
Yeah. So from my experience, just focus on one and get the best score you can on just one of those tests, and then use your time to do something better. Make your application,
exactly.
Improve your application instead of studying for another test is you know what I advise.
Okay, if it's okay, I can ask one more question.
Yeah,
Just
sure.
related.
Yes. Sure.
Okay, SAT 1 is okay. Then we have SAT subject test. How important is SAT subject test in you know, the admission process?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, you know, nowadays, obviously SAT subject tests have kind of gone down in popularity, but there are a lot of universities where they still recommend students take them. Obviously, you know, particularly the SAT math subject test, and then one other one, maybe it's science or something else. I believe that in general, these subject tests have kind of decreased in their relevance in the application process, but there are some schools such as like University of Pennsylvania Wharton, which recommends their students take at least the SAT math subject test. My advice, based on the student's background, you know, if there is time to, you know, perhaps prepare for at least the math subject test, SAT Math 2 to be specific. But, you know, if there's other things that the student must be working on, you know, if they're a rising senior and they have applications, there are, you know, much more important matters to really deal with. But it's simply just another side kind of metric. You know, if you're comparing two students and they have almost the same exact background, and one has taken the SAT subject math test, which is recommended, you know, that's just kind of a little bit of a deciding factor. It's like that student's more likely to get in. But I would not say it's like at the same weight as the SAT or ACT at all.
Okay. Mr. Prashant, you would like to ask some questions?
Yeah, just thanks.
Yes.
This is probably to both of you, Divesh and Niral. Is there any percentage of international students they look for? You know, as you said, they would like a different mix of students. So, is there any kind of a guideline they look at? How many of international students? And
How many international students?
A
Guideline for international students getting admitted to these schools.
right.
So I guess I'm confused as your question. You know, what do you mean guidelines?
Yeah, so let me say, you know, you have 100 students, and typically we would like to have 15% or 15 students from international and rest 85 from the local US students. So is that something, any kind of typical numbers they follow, or?
So each university has a different criteria. Stanford might, you know, there's internal discussions with the admissions department at these universities that determine, hey, we want this many international students this year. Or, you know, they might increase it, they might decrease it, but I really don't. That's really not a limitation. We've never had any issues working with, like, you know, we worked with international students from mainland China and Hong Kong, and you know, they've all successfully got into top universities. That's not a concerning topic whatsoever. If you're a good candidate, you have a good SAT score, you have a good GPA, and then you're unique and you stick out in your, you know, from the other applicants, you know, you'll get into a good school.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Anyone having next question? Okay, one question which is asked to me by many of the parents: how important is the role of AP? Because like students coming from India, they do not have that provision, you know, but taking APs with their school, they have to take it separately. In US, it is offered with their school, and it's very common. So, you know, what edge a student get if they do AP and if they do not do AP?
Yeah, so really, you know, APs in general, there's obviously many might be familiar with the IB program as well. All these classes is an indicator of whether the student was taking a rigorous course load in high school. So it's all relative to their high school. There could be a high school, students have gone to high schools where they don't offer any APs, they don't offer any IBs, but they took, say an honors class or something that was, academically rigorous. And that's all the school is, college, the university is going to be looking for. It's like, okay, this high school doesn't even offer APs or IBs, but the students still took, the top course load that they could, that was kind of fitting, whether it's for their passion or, for their academics in general. But it's really just an indicator of whether the student was taking a rigorous course load. There's no significance in relation to like the ACT or SAT with AP scores.
So there is an advantage. So it's an advantage of if you take AP classes, because it shows that the student is challenging himself and taking a rigorous course load. Yeah, so even if you're an Indian student and you go out of your way to take AP classes, it's going to benefit you on your application. But that doesn't mean you have to take every AP class that's available. Just take a few select AP classes that follow along with what you're interested in and do really well in those classes, and take the AP exam and do well in the AP exam and put that on your application, and it will give you an advantage on your application.
Got it. So like in India, though you have not studied in India, Niral, CBSE and ICSE, it's quite famous. So many of the students do not get chance to do AP. I mean, because of the, they are conducted only in Delhi or Mumbai, and they do not coincide with the school curriculum. So if in case a student is aspiring for a Ivy League, how important it is to take, AP in case he doesn't do AP, will he be in, it won't be edge for him? I mean, is it going to be, he will be taken as a downgraded? Many of the times if parents ask that we are aiming for a top university, but we do not have provision to take AP. So US people will be taking that advantage.
Yeah, I would say that really, if there are other things that a student can do to get their edge, and they have done, I look at it really in terms of like a priority basis. So obviously, like the first thing you should focus on is the student's profile, their background. How do they stand out in relation to other students in whatever they're applying for? Second thing is like, those test scores, I would say maybe the test scores in the background is really equivalent, but, the SAT, ACT, GPA, those things are really the two most important things to really worry about in terms of setting up the student to be, of like an Ivy League or a top school, caliber. Now, beyond that,
could you re-explain that, Niral? I don't think I follow.
Yeah, so I'm saying like one of the, most important factors that really the student first has to have down is their like background, their kind of profile, and their SAT or ACT.
So their hook and what makes them stand out, what makes them unique.
Exactly. Okay. Yes. Right. Now, beyond that, like I said, the college is going to be looking at, the student's locality in terms of the course load that they took, the high schools. It will give them an advantage if they are to take like the AP and no other students have. Now, how important that is really depends on how strongly established the hook and what made them stand out already is. So now I'm not saying like it's a necessity at all for the AP, unless the student has already the other things covered. In terms of a time basis, time is better spent improving the GPA or their SAT or their profile than studying for an outside AP exam, if that makes sense.
If we rank sort of the importance of all of these things, the unique factor that, what makes you stand out is like number one at these top universities. That can compensate for a lower test score or a lower GPA. Okay. Yep. The second thing is, GPA and SAT, right? Next is basically everything else. So, if you didn't have AP classes in your school and you went out of your way to take it, great. If you had time for it, it's an advantage. But if you don't have time for it, it's not going to, make or break you. As long as the other two things are solid, I don't think it'll make that big of a difference, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Can you please repeat what's the first one? What's the first one? Can you
the uniqueness factor.
Uniqueness.
The hook, right?
Yeah.
What makes this student unique compared to the other student? Okay, if I'm an admissions officer, wow, I have 1,000 applicants from India. they all want to study engineering. What's different? What makes you stand out from all those people, right? If one student created something, or he did something unique or amazing, or he has a unique life goal and he can back it up, that person's going to get selected over just the other students that all did the same thing and just have the test scores.
Okay, so here comes, I got it. So here comes one question. I was attending one seminar by admission officer in Embassy of USA, and he was also talking on these things, uniqueness and all. The average of MIT is like 1560. I was seeing some statistics. Yes. So in case a student is really unique, but his SAT score is like 1450, do you think he will get admission? I mean, he will be considered.
So how about we look at it from this perspective? We have 2 applicants to MIT. One applicant has perfect test scores, perfect GPA, took all AP classes, okay? Perfect profile. We have a next student, still high test score, still high GPA, but not perfect like the other student, okay? Maybe a little bit less. But the second student, he already created like a mobile application. He already created a startup. People are already using it in his community. And it's already been done. He can showcase it. It gained popularity. People know about it. Well, all of a sudden, this student is more valuable than this student, right?
Yes.
According to these top U.S. schools, that's how they're going to view it. The student that's already, he still meets the bar, right? He still has high grades, high SAT. Yeah, it's not perfect like the other student, but because this student already created something, it makes him unique. And that's why he's going to get selected over the other student, even though the other student has perfect test scores. So
yeah, it's like, go ahead. You can finish.
So basically, the perfect score doesn't guarantee you, admission in like the top branch of Ivy
Right.
League.
Yeah, no, not at all.
So a girl that we worked with, it was a Chinese girl, and she goes to Stanford now. She had a 32 on her ACT. 32.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is much. If you
The
look
average
at the average
at Stanford's like a 35, to elaborate, 34, 35.
Yeah, I thought could have been, it's probably like a 35 or a 36, like for most students at Stanford. We can look it up, but it's, it's in the top percentile. A 32 is not the top percentile by any means, for a school like Stanford. But her application was so unique and so compelling that she got chosen over another student that got a perfect ACT score and got in to the university. So even though she was weaker on her test score, the uniqueness factor got her in.
And honestly,
that's one thing you need to understand, like culturally speaking, and there's a lot of cultural differences that, go into why the uniqueness factor is important. In the United States, they value uniqueness a lot. In India, I feel like test scores, and I could be wrong, I'm not familiar. I didn't study in India. I also studied in the US. In India, test scores is end all be all, right?
Yes.
China, test scores is end all be all. In the United States, test scores is not end all be all. Yeah, you need to have the minimum test scores, but what gets you into the school is the uniqueness. And a lot of people don't know that, and they don't know how to make themselves unique on their application.
Got it.
Yep.
So there is one question, ma'am Shobha Mukund is asking, how do Canadian universities compare to Ivy schools in the US?
Okay. Niral, do you want to take that, or should I take it?
I believe, you have something, you've worked with a Canadian student, right? Just recently, so.
Canadian students are not comparable to universities are not comparable to the Ivy League universities.
Yeah.
If you think about the value of these Ivy League universities, you really just have to follow the money. Okay. So universities in the US and Canada have things called endowments. Okay. That's basically how much resources and money the school has. So if you notice, the universities with the biggest endowments with the most money are like the Harvard, Stanford, Ivy League universities. Why does that matter? Universities use these endowments to invest in programs and resources for their students. So if it costs $10 million for Bill Gates to come to your university to speak to students, Harvard University can pay that and it's not a problem because they have so much money. Okay. But now Canadian universities don't have that much money. It's lower budget. Canada overall is lower budget. There's less money there. So there's not like, there's much less opportunities for, things like that. There's less investment to the students because they have less money. But now with that said, there's some very particular Canadian programs that are worthwhile, that can, if you strategically place yourself and, you get into some of these programs, you can work your way and get equivalent placement to, or at least try to get equivalent placement to some of these Ivy League universities. And that depends on the field. So for example, for business, which is what I specialize in because that's my particular background. So I work with a lot of business, students that want to study business at US universities. There's there's two programs in Canada in particular for business that I highly recommend to students that can help you get, good placements. Even in the US, even though you went to school in Canada, it'll place you at a top firm in the United States. But these programs in Canada are very selective and there's a different strategy to getting into each one. So the answer to your question is it depends on which field your student's going into. But overall, the broad consensus is the Ivy League schools are like here, the top of the top. They're the richest, most powerful universities. And they have unlimited resources basically because they're that wealthy. That's why people from all over the world come to these universities. But the Canadian universities are just not even comparable, not even in the same category. But with that said, you can still do well if you go to a Canadian university, if you're strategic about which program you select and which program you get into. And what that's what it is in a nutshell.
Got it.
I understand with visa and immigration requirements, Canada can be a very, advantageous place to study because it can help you get PR much faster than the United States. So, don't discount Canadian schools. Just make sure you apply to the right programs for your course of study. And, you can do well in Canada too. But just know it's not going to be in the same category as Ivy League schools. And, it's going to be much cheaper in reflection to Ivy League schools. An Ivy League school could cost $60,000 per year. A Canadian university could cost 20,000 Canadian dollars per year, which is like 15,000 US dollars per year. So it's a huge price difference.
Got it. 4 times. Any other question from anyone? Someone who has joined recently? If you would like to ask any particular question, profile, essay, anything.
And sort of one more thing.
Yes.
On Google, you can type in any university in the US or Canada on Wikipedia. And on Wikipedia, it'll tell you how big the endowment is. So if you type in Harvard University and you go to the Wikipedia page, it'll say like the endowment's like $1 billion. Now, if you type in a Canadian university, $20 billion, right? Now, if you go to if you type in a Canadian university, University of Toronto, the endowment might be like, $300 million. I don't know what it is, but it's a lot less. So, and you can do that yourself and, look at these endowments. These endowments have value in what they can do for the student. Sorry, I cut you off.
Yeah, got it. So is there any particular question? I mean, I believe you have answered many of the thing, and let me just check it out. Someone has asked, do you guys cost a whole program? Soumya is there. Soumya is still there. No, he is not there. He has gone.
Aditya, this is Rohit again, if I can ask.
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
Again, a very basic question. how important is having a chemistry in your high school to apply for engineering undergrad course? Is it sufficient to have only physics and maths, or is it necessary to have chemistry as well?
Are you saying like choosing to take it in your course load, or if your high school offers
Yes,
it?
in your high school course. Yes, in your high school.
I guess a lot of that really depends. Engineering is obviously a very broad field. If you're not pursuing, chemical engineering in particular, maybe it's not as important. But schools will, universities, depending on the program you apply to, will look at kind of like how many related science or engineering courses you took. I guess it's very hard to like answer specifically whether it's like necessary or not. It kind of depends on the student's background. It's like if they're involved in a lot of physics and math related organizations, and that's really where their passion is like really focused on, then definitely, there's no point in wasting time taking a chemistry class. Now, if there's, if the student is substituting that chemistry class with like an easier course or maybe an elective, and that's kind of visible on the transcript, and they didn't really do anything to stand out in, the engineering maths or in general, then perhaps, it'd be better to take the chemistry to indicate that they're taking a rigorous course load. But yeah, I guess I can't provide like an exact answer, but depending on the situation, if they...
I was asking, sorry to interrupt, I was asking,
yeah, go ahead.
In India so far, if you want to pursue a engineering course in any undergrad, you need to have physics, chemistry, and mathematics in your high school. It's a mandatory requirement. But I think now this year, the All India Council of Technical Education, which makes all these guidelines, now they have made chemistry is no more mandatory, but only physics and maths is mandatory. So that's what I was trying to understand. In US, as per the guidelines of whatever authorities, whoever decides, is it mandatory to have physics, chemistry, and mathematics, all three, to apply for engineering course, or is it only physics and maths?
So in the United States, there's no like authority that governs all the universities. The universities govern themselves, and it's going to be dependent on the program. So a university, let's say chemical engineering at University of Illinois, that program might require, or it's probably going to require, that you take chemistry, physics, calculus 1 and calculus 2 in high school. But another university might not require that.
Yeah, so, for example, like California Institute of Technology, it's called Caltech. It's a technical institution. They only admit students who are pursuing some kind of engineering degree. Most likely, a technical institution like that will require that you take chemistry as part of your just prerequisites. Now, Stanford or, say like, UC Berkeley, they're much more liberal in, what you're committed to and what you're choosing. They're not specifically restraining you to an engineering field. So if you didn't take chemistry in your high school and you're applying for like something engineering, they're not at all going to look at that and compare you.
So there's no broad answer. There's no one size fits all. It's going to be unique per university, per program. That's what it is.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good. So if you have any other question, we can go ahead. Or
I do
yes,
have a
ma'am.
question.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
this is
but
not directly related to anything, about the course or anything, but it's mostly consequential of what's happening right now with the COVID-19, right? Have you done any kind of research? Because I think most of the seniors or rising seniors right now, as they understand, I don't know how far this is true, but they say the admission rate will be very low this year because a lot of students are taking a gap year. And the next year, there's going to be, a flood of applications from students who are taking a gap year, and also, students seniors graduating. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah.
How competitive will it be?
Yeah, no, that's a great
Absolutely.
question. Go ahead, Divesh. You've done some research too.
So admissions, the COVID-19 only gives you an advantage.
Yeah.
Applying to the programs. So you have to look at these universities as businesses, right? International students or just students in general, like make these universities money, the fact that there's going to be more students taking a gap year, that means they have more seats to fill those seats at the universities. So it's going to be easier to get into some of these programs with the COVID-19 pandemic, because these schools are like going to be more desperate to fill spots. You're right though, next year when things get back to normal, things are going to, it's going to become less easy and it's going to become harder. So the COVID-19 pandemic makes it easier because there's going to be less international students attending some of these schools. There's more spots. They have to fill the gap in revenue.
And also to elaborate, when, a lot of these universities, a good majority of their, funding, their like income comes from international students paying full tuition. Because if you see, obviously, a lot of international students don't have strong financial aid or scholarship opportunities coming into the US. And now with the huge decrease in that, they're going to need some way to kind of compensate for that lost tuition income. And therefore, they're going to be either filling more seats in to have more students attend, or, obviously, they're going to find ways to kind of like, I guess to summarize, they're not going to like decrease the number of seats that they accept students for. It's either going to increase.
Yeah, so supply and demand. Yeah. These universities want to make money. They only make money if they admit students. There's less students that are, less international students coming in to pay full tuition. There's even less local students coming in. So because there's less students, that are willing to commit to these universities, they're more desperate for students than they would be in normal circumstances. Therefore, increasing your chances. And
Correct. Fine.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. But I guess we just have to look at it as more competitive for next year. I'm looking at next year. That's the reason I'm more focused on that.
I would say yes. Less competitive next year. Absolutely. I'm sorry, more competitive next year.
More
Absolutely.
competitive.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other question from anyone? Can we take one last question if someone wants to ask? If there is no question, then maybe you can wind up.
Yeah,
So
for
fine.
sure.
Fine. Thank you so much, Niral, and thank you so much, Devesh. It was very enlightening experience to converse with you guys and to guide our parents and students